for me. But I was very proud of it, and I showed it off to everyone, and here it is. It wasn't great, but her encouragement helped spark my dream to publish my own books. And in 2011, I did write and self-publish my first novel. While I was working on that, I realized that there are not that many, or there weren't at that time, affordable options for publishing help. So I ended up doing it all but editing on my own. And that also sparked me to create my non-traditional publishing company, Rivershore Books, which we charge for our time, but we don't take rights or royalties, and I try to keep it affordable. And with that, I've helped publish more than 100 books for other people. So today I'll go over the timing of self-publishing, do-it-yourself options authors have, what costs you can expect to pay, what to avoid, and best practices. My math professor in college told me that she almost became an author, but one of her professors used her paper as an example of what not to do. They didn't realize she was in the class at that time, and that crushed her dream. So I want to be a place of empowerment and support for authors, so any examples that you see in the handout PDF or in this slideshow are my own. Every book's journey is different, and this might not match exactly your process, but I found it to be a good starting point. So the first step, of course, is to write the book. How many of you have already written a book? Awesome. That's great. So the next step is to self-edit, and you can do this by reading it on the computer and making changes as you go along. You can print it out, and sometimes that helps you see things that you wouldn't have on the computer. You can read it out loud to yourself. For my first book, when I edited it, I went through it at least 5 times, and editing actually took longer than writing it did. But when I was able to read through it without finding any errors, that's when I knew that it was ready for my editor. If you look on page 2 in the handout, and I'm assuming you all have that PDF, there's a self-publishing checklist, and that includes sections of the book that you might want to include, such as a dedication, a conclusion, author bio, and then also the steps in the process. You can use that checklist as it is, or if you have parts that you want to add to it or take away from it, you're welcome to revise it and just use it as a guide. So while your book is with your editor, it's a good time to start marketing. And this is coming from someone who marketing is not my strong suit, but I realize it's important. And the more you market, the more likely it is that people will find your book. And you can also use this time to create accounts on the printing websites such as KDP or Lulu. Those are what I use, and I'll talk about those a little bit more later. And then any ebook distributor sites that you choose to use as well. And you can get your ISBN if you choose to purchase that. You can apply for a Library of Congress control number, LCCN, and I recommend doing that early in the process because once your book is published, it's not possible or it's very difficult to get one. And then you can also apply for a copyright, and you can consider creating your own publishing company for your books. It's not required, but it does help your books look more professional if you have a logo and an actual publisher name. Once your book is edited, then you can start the design process. I usually start with the interior because the spine width depends on the length of the book. But you can start with the cover if you prefer. So once the cover is done and the interior, you can promote again, always just continuing to promote and market. And when that's done, you can publish. And publishing with self-publishing means that you upload the book's interior and cover onto your preferred publishing platforms such as KDP. Again, with the checklist, I've included my process, which is to upload to KDP for paperback, upload to Lulu for hardcover, and then Kindle, Nook, and Smashwords for the ebook versions. And once you've done that, you can breathe and you can celebrate. Publishing a book is a big accomplishment. Not a lot of people do it, and you should take a moment to acknowledge that fact. One of the best parts of self-publishing is the freedom that it gives you. So you can do it all on your own. You can hire only parts of it, or you can hire every part of it. It's completely your choice. So I'll start by going over the formatting of the interior. For paperback and hardcover, they're basically the same. For paperback books that are nonfiction, I'd use the same size, so that would be 6x9. For fiction, I do 5x8. Usually you can also do 5.5. And most authors have Word or similar already on your computers. So you can definitely use that, and that's what I used for my first books. But I've since moved to InDesign. But with Word, KDP does offer a free how-to guide, and I've included a link for that in the PDF as well. For InDesign, I use that now because it is faster. I found it to be more formatting friendly than Word is. But it is an expense and a learning curve. So. If you go to page 5 in the PDF, I've included a formatting example that is pretty bad. So I'd like to go over that with you guys and talk about what could be different in this and how we could improve it. So the title page, what would you change here?
Too many fonts.
Absolutely. There are 4 fonts here, which is a lot, especially for this small amount of text, but in general, it's better to keep your entire book to 2 or maybe 3 different fonts. And then also the script with the script is not different enough to accentuate it. So for best results, combine a fancier font with a simpler one, such as a script with a serif. Okay, so first page of the book. What do you see here? Or what do you not see, more accurately? Okay, so generally the first page would have the copyright page rather than the body of the book. So that's missing, and I've got an example of it here. Your language might be different in yours. This is what I use, but each copyright page will have the book title, the copyright year, the author name, the ISBN, and publisher info if you have that. The countdown in the middle of the page there represents the edition of the book. So if you were to revise the book and put out a second edition, you would delete the 1. If you put out a third edition, you would delete the 2, and so on. The other thing here is that books should begin on an odd numbered page. So when the print book is open, the first page will show up on the right. Should be here. Whereas because this is on an even page, it would show up on the left. Another example. All right, so the first paragraphs on page 6, what will we change here?
The second sentence has to go up.
Yep, either up or it needs to be indented, you're right. And then also the margins here are pretty large. So ideal margins would be between 1/4 and 3/4 of an inch, and these are 1 inch, so they're pretty big. You also want to be careful of too small of margins because you want, when you open the book, to not have your thumb cover the text. And also you want to be able to see in the spine shadow here. And then also indents are generally 1/4 inch, but whatever size you choose, they should be consistent throughout. All right, the next paragraph on that page, the margins and the indents are correct here, but what else might you change?
Justification looks a bit funny to me.
Exactly. So left justified is what we're looking for, and that would help avoid the ragged right that you see on the right side here. It leads to cleaner lines and just looks more professional. All right, moving to page 7. What do you see about these first 2 paragraphs?
Different size font.
Anything else?
The leading between the paragraphs.
Exactly. Yep. So when indents are used, spaces or leading between the paragraphs are not needed, and vice versa. When the leading is used, indents are not needed. Just choose one. Generally, for fiction, I use indents. For nonfiction, it can be either. And then, as Carol, I believe, pointed out, the 2 paragraphs are in different fonts. So you want to make sure that the same font is used throughout. If you do want to use a different font to set aside something, such as a handwritten note, then you can, but I would suggest using a very different font for that to actually emphasize it.
Did you say you use indents for fiction and no indent for nonfiction?
Yeah, so indents for fiction, and then nonfiction, I have used both, so
Oh,
the other. All right, middle of page 7, there are 3 paragraphs here. What do you see that's in common with all 3?
They're all indented and they're all justified.
Anything else?
script and non-script. Too many fonts.
Yep. They are all very hard to read. So when you use a script in a full paragraph, or all caps in a full paragraph, or a small font, it makes it hard to read. Granted, this is Latin, but even so. So I have a few recommendations of fonts that you can use. Garamond, Palatino Linotype, or Book Antiqua, in sizes 11, 12, or 13. I found those to be good options. I do not recommend Times New Roman because that's generally a default font and is looked on as unprofessional in print books. All right, last one, page 8. Does anyone know what it's called when there's a single word or line at the top of a page by itself?
It's a widow or an orphan, but I can never remember who is who.
Yep. When it's at the top, it's an orphan, and when it's at the bottom of the previous page, then it's widow. And I had to look that up myself. So you want to try to avoid these, and I do that by bringing the text to the previous page or moving additional lines to the affected page. All right. So ebook formatting is very different than paperback formatting, and it's much more simple. And the reason for that is because e-readers allow readers to change their font size, style, page color, page size, everything. And the formatting for an ebook, you want to avoid getting in the way of that functionality. So while I don't recommend Times New Roman for print, I do recommend it for ebooks. And also just use the typical page size of 8.5 by 11. Use word styles and bookmarks. If you just Google word styles and bookmarks, you can find a lot of good tutorials there. And then also Smashwords, the Nook, and the Kindle each have their own how-to guide. It's free for you to use. I use the Smashwords one, and I found that to be very helpful. And then just make a few tweaks for the other versions. So for example, the Kindle uses an automatic table of contents, while the Nook uses a manual table of contents that you actually insert the hyperlinks with using bookmarks. All right. The next thing that you can do on your own is the cover. And I'm sure you've all heard of Photoshop, but GIMP is a free version of that. So before I started publishing for others, I used GIMP for my own, and I found it to have everything that I needed. I do think Photoshop is faster, more efficient. That's why I use that now, but you can have the same or similar results using GIMP. So that's a good resource, and I've included a link to download that in the PDF. There are some rules, just design rules that you'll want to follow, and I'm going to use my example. When I was 7, I did not know these rules, surprisingly. And so you'll see I used way too long of a title and different fonts. I don't think I had permission to use these images. So all things just that you want to watch out for, and I'm sure you know more than I did at that age. So I've included a few cover examples. I've included one on each of these pages that I think is better and one that I think is worse. But I'd just like to open it up for discussion, and we can talk about what we like about each, what we think could be better, and why. And I put these together pretty quickly. I won't be offended by anything you say, so tell me what you think.
I do like to see a book cover that bleeds to all edges. That's a very professional look. On the left.
Mhm.
I like the color of the author name on the left. I like how it ties back to that leaf there.
Mhm.
I like the white shadow around the title on the left.
Mm-hmm.
I can't read the title on the right. It's blends in with the leaves and the tree branches.
Mhm. Yep. Yeah, so I agree that the one on the left is the better one in this example. The color is actually the same on both for the author name, but because it's on a white background, it looks different.
Oh.
Interesting. And then, yeah, the title on the dark background, dark on dark, you can't read it at all. And then the other thing is that this book on the right title is, the letters are separated out, so they call that either kerning or something else. Technical term that I'm not going to remember right now, but one of it is that when you would write that out by hand, those letters would be connected, so that when you put it into print, you want to make sure that they're connected as well. All right. What about this one? What do you like? What do you not like?
I like the one on the right. The green doesn't excite me.
It doesn't fit with the color palette of the picture.
I agree.
And it kind of is hard on my eyes. Some of those brighter colors are hard to see.
Exactly. Yep. So I don't shy away from using colors, but you got to know this shade of color to use and match it with the image. So the color is the only difference. The color of the text is the only difference between these two. Yeah, and the neon shades you tend to want to avoid. Last one. So what do you like about these? What would you change?
I like the one on the right just because it's more simple.
I like the one on the left because the title is encircled and stands out more to me.
Yeah, the framing does look nice. I might try something a little non-traditional and put the author name in the lower right corner, see how that looks.
Mm.
Good idea. I prefer the one on the right just because it is more simple. And while I like the flowers on their own, I don't think they go with the picture that was used. So I might do a cover with the flowers encircling the title, but without the ribbon on the bottom.
That's a good point. You generally want to keep just one visual metaphor per cover and not combine 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different elements.
Yeah, so moving on to editing. This is the one part where I'm gonna tell you I do recommend hiring someone. But we can talk first about editing your own work. And I've already touched on this a bit, but first drafts are imperfect. Mine always are. And I don't know anyone whose aren't, and that's all right. That's gonna be expected. I recommend stepping away for a while. Fresh eyes can help. With my books, I tend to write them and then walk away, just work on other things for a month or two, and then come back, and then I find things that I wouldn't have. As I mentioned, you can read it out loud or print it to catch more typos. With my first book, I kind of rushed through the process, and I was so excited to see it in print. So I did edit it a bunch of times, like I said, but even so, when I got it, it was full of typos and errors that I wanted to fix on almost every page. So printing it out also helped with seeing those things and that. Take your time. And then finally, hire an editor. I do recommend this because that second set of eyes can be. So print on demand and ebook distributors. I use the ones on the left, so KDP for paperback print on demand and Kindle, Lulu for hardcover print on demand, Barnes & Noble Press for Nook, and Smashwords for other ebook formats. These are all free to upload, but they will take a distribution fee, and the print places will, of course, take money to cover the cost of the book and shipping. You have some other options, such as Ingram Spark, which is paperback and ebooks. I have heard good things about them. I've not used them myself because they do charge $50 every time you upload. But if you want your books to be in bookstores, that's going to be your best option because they offer a wholesale option that, for example, KDP does not offer to bookstores. Barnes & Noble has a print-on-demand, paperback, and hardcover option, which is newer. And since I've been happy with KDP and Lulu, I've not looked too in-depth in that. That is an option. And then similar with BookBaby, that's similar to Smashwords. So you can make your choice there between ebook distributors. And then your other option is to do a bulk book printer rather than print-on-demand. And I would recommend this if you plan to sell a large number of copies because you can get a cheaper per book price there. Or if you have specific printing elements that you would like to include in your book, such as making it a board book, because the print-on-demand places don't offer that. So marketing. You want to start early and be consistent. Just continue it throughout the entire process and after you're done. You can do this by pursuing book reviews, and I don't recommend paying for reviews, and I don't recommend book swaps, where you meet with another author and review their book in exchange for a review of your books. And the reason for that is because both of those are against Amazon's rules, and if they find out, the reviews will be taken down. And so that's a risk. You can participate in a blog tour, and that's when you send your book's information or guest posts to a bunch of different bloggers, and then they can write about it on their blogs, and you can reach a different audience that you might not have on your own. You can host a Facebook party. With everything being remote right now, that's a good option for the typical book signing or book launch that people might have hosted in person before. And then either after COVID or outside, you can do a book signing. So last month I went to one of my author's book signings, which was in person but outside, and everyone was in masks, so it was an option. It was fun. At my book signings, I did read a couple excerpts from my book to show people what it was. But generally, you just mingle and talk about your book, answer questions. You can create an author website, and this is generally a landing page. You can do a blog if you think that would be something fun for you that you would want to keep up. I do not enjoy blogging, so it's more of a hassle, and then I forget to do it, and it's not consistent, and it's better to be without. But your website, you want to tell people about yourself, tell people about your books, and any events if you have any coming up. And then you can design bookmarks or something similar that you can give away. I chose bookmarks because I wanted something that people would be more likely to keep than a business card. So when I published my first book and started looking into the different costs for things, it was going to cost thousands of dollars at that time. And so I decided the only affordable option was to do it all myself, but there are more affordable options now, thankfully. So I've included a table here of typical services and the price range for each. There's a wide variety, but you can find quality people I found in each of the price ranges. You just have to research, look for reviews, that kind of thing. So content editing is, in my experience, very few books need this, but it's when you want the editor to reorganize your book for you, help you with plot issues, any big picture kind of things like that. And because it takes more of the editor's time to do that, that's going to be your most expensive. So that's $5 to $15 per page. And in professional editing, a page is typically defined as 250 words. A typical novel is about 200 to 300 pages, to give you an estimate there. Copy editing is focused on grammar, but it's also ideal word choice, so very pretty versus beautiful. And then also sentence structure, that kind of thing. And that's $2.50 to $5 per page. And then proofreading is, I consider it a final edit to the book, and it's focused on grammar and typos and yeah, that kind of thing. So that would be $1 to $3.50 per page. And then we get into the design parts. Cover design, again, there's a wide range here, so 100 to 1,500. Print interior is 150 to 2,000. Ebook interior, 50 to 300. Ebooks are a lot simpler, as I've mentioned, so that's why they're a lot cheaper than print. And then logo design would be if you were to create your own publishing company and you want a logo for that, that would be 100 to 2,500. With all that said, unless your book needs intense editing, it's possible to hire everything for under 1,000. With my company, Rivershore Books, my typical package is 700, and then I also, that includes proofreading, cover design, print design, ebook design, and then if authors need more editing, then that would be in addition. But I charge $5 per page for content editing and $3 per page for copy editing, and $1 per page for proofreading. So additional costs are ISBNs. Each of these sites, like KDP, Nook Press, etc., offer free versions of ISBNs, but these will list that site as the publisher rather than you. So if you want to be listed, then you buy them from Bowker, which is my identifiers. I've included that link in the PDF. And they charge $125 for one, $295 for 10, and so on. They have bulk options as well. If you plan to publish multiple books, the bulk options are going to be more affordable for you in the long run. When I publish, I do use paid ISBNs for the print version, so for paperback and hardcover, but for ebook, I use the free because people are more likely to be searching with the ISBN if it's a print book. The copyright is $45. It's not a required step because the law is that as soon as you write it down, it's copyrighted to you. However, if you were to get into a legal battle, it's very hard to prove that without actually registering the copyright. And finally, LCCN, Library of Congress control number, is free. You just need to submit an application, and when you do that, you'll need your ISBN to submit.
If anyone's wondering, you can buy 1,000 ISBNs for $1,500 because I've done it.
Yep, I did that too. Right, so last section is what to avoid and best practices. I'll start with what to avoid because I always like to end on a positive note. So as we've discussed, rushing, you don't want to rush the work here. Take your time. Decision by committee is if you're working with a graphic artist or if you're designing it yourself. If you ask a group of people, they're all going to have different opinions on the parts they like and the parts they don't like. So while it's important to consider what your intended audience would like, you also want to consider what you as the author want for the design. As I've discussed, waiting to apply for a Library of Congress control number, because for whatever reason, once your book is published, they won't let you apply for that anymore. If they decide to include your book in the Library of Congress, they'll give you one. So there are companies that will take royalties and there are companies that will take upfront fees. And either option is fine. Traditional publishers take the royalties. Non-traditional hybrid publishers take upfront fees. What you want to avoid is a company that both takes royalties and charges upfront fees. I think that's charging you twice. You also want to avoid giving up too much of your book rights. Traditional publishers will take rights, but usually it's for a set period of time and then get them back. I'm sure that depends on the publisher and depends on the author what you're willing to give up. I believe that books belong to their authors. And you want to avoid leaving marketing until the end. Like I've gone over, you want to start that early and continue it throughout. And don't try to do everything at once. That's just going to stress you out. Take your time and do things one at a time. Best practices. Breathe and enjoy the process. The checklist on page 2, you can use that or create your own, and that'll give you a step-by-step for each part of your process. And you want to mark it early and often. Research anyone you choose to hire. If they don't have reviews, that's not necessarily a bad sign. If their work is good, looks good to you. But if they have bad reviews, of course, that's a bad sign. There's also a website, and I did not include this, but I can send it out, that reviews publishers so they can tell you if they're bad choice to use or not. Don't hesitate to compare estimates for editing and design. An estimate is not a commitment, but just be upfront with people that you're talking to that you're not ready to commit yet until you are. And acknowledge the work that you've already put in. Writing on its own is hard sometimes, and it's a lot of work. And so you should just acknowledge that you've put in that time already. And finally, celebrate your accomplishment. Publishing is a big deal, and not a ton of people do it. And so you can consider yourself part of the special group and celebrate that. All right, so publishing is very rewarding. There's a lot of steps to it, self-publishing especially, but once you have the book in your hand, it's wonderful. So I've been able to publish books for both my grandparents, two of my grandparents. This one is my grandpa. He wrote letters when he was in World War II, and we recently got them back, so I photocopied them and typed them out for him. And so that's a special to our family. And then my grandma is known for her lefse, so I helped her publish her memoirs around that. And then my own books. When you are able to hold your book in your hand, there's no better feeling, in my opinion. There's no feeling like that. I'm sure there's better feelings. Yeah, so there's many steps, but it is worth it. Are there any questions?
I have a question. What is the advantage of having the Library of Congress control number? I've written a short book. It's only 25 pages interior, but you must have 50 pages to get a Library of Congress number.
Mm-hmm.
But what is that for?
That helps libraries find your book easier. So if having a library have your book is important to you, then I recommend doing that.
You have to have that for a library to have your book?
I think they can get it without that, but it's harder, and some librarians won't take the time if it doesn't have
But you
that.
have to have at least 50 pages to get one. So,
The Library of Congress makes a certain number of book announcements on material that gets sent to them. So by exposing them to your material, then they can also announce it to libraries. The bigger program for that is called the Cataloging and Publication Program. But you have to have 3 books published by people who aren't yourself to qualify for that bigger program.
I have a question.
Okay.
This relates to a book I'm doing on family history, but I do not want it to go public. I want to only get printed some private copies for those who are my relatives. So I wondered if you have some advice about the best way to do that, because I go way back. Like I used Lulu maybe 10 years ago. And I think back then you could get copies that never went public. You can't do that on KDP anymore. I mean, when it was CreateSpace, I could do things that I only wanted private copies of, and it never went on sale publicly. So I was feeling good about that. But then they now merged all that into the Amazon KDP platform. And so I'm thinking that's not going to be the way I go because of privacy issues.
Yeah, like you said, KDP used to let you when they were CreateSpace, but you can do it up to the draft stage, but then all your copies will have proof on the cover. So I wouldn't recommend that. So Lulu still does have a private option that you can do there. So
okay, yeah, okay. So Lulu, we can still go there and get it privately done and not have to have the whole world read your family's history, right?
Yeah.
Good, thank you.
That may be the case for Ingram Spark, because I know Ingram Lightning Source allows non-distribution. You'll have to check it.
Yeah, I kind of like checked into that a little bit, but as soon as she said $50 to do the upload, I'm going like, I don't think I need to do that.
They run specials though quite often where it's $0. And I think usually there's one in January because it's tied with NaNoWriMo.
Okay.
So watch for that.
I think Barnes and Noble might also do that, where you can just print private copies. And I honestly, in your case, Donna, I would just go to a regular printer and ask them to print it for you.
I thought yeah, Tyler, I did look into that, but guess what? It was twice the price that I could get from Lulu or, I'm not going to go to KDP, but if I were to go there, but it's like way more expensive.
Okay.
The make break is probably around 500 to 750 copies where you want to do offset printing instead of print on demand.
Well, even the digital printing that they do at like different sites and different companies that I've looked at and worked, one of which I've worked with before, but they want a lot more money. Like when I put in and asked for a quote, they're telling me, $7 or $8. And if I go to Lulu and put in the same thing, then they're telling me $2 to $3.
All right, do we have any other questions on the floor? Anything at all? Marketing, how to get book reviews?
I have another question. Once you have your book published or in the process, and you have some local bookstores and gift shops interested, how much do you sell it to the gift stores or the bookstores? What discount do they normally get off the retail price?
I don't have a ton of experience with this, but I believe it's about 40% off the listed price.
40%?
Mhm.
I do
Yeah.
mine for half off, but that's not, it's up to you, basically.
Yeah, most places want 40%. In the past, there were some places I knew of that would do 20 or 30. And if you make your own special deal with them, some of them might agree to like 30, but over time I found that it's just easier to stick with 40 for everybody than try to keep track of, oh, I have a deal with this one to do 30, this one to do 35, this one to do 40. And then you also don't have to worry about anybody talking to each other, but well, he gave me a deal, why didn't you give,
Right.
so I just go with 40 with
Big
everybody.
chat here.
This is Bill Spool. That's my experience. I've just marketed my book locally, and it's 40%. And then if you want to take your book and put it on Amazon, it gets up to about 55%.
That's a great point. If you want to sell on Amazon, you got to be able to sell at 55 off and make a profit, or at least break even.
When you put it on KDP, is KDP the publisher then? You wouldn't have your publisher in the front.
You can consider yourself the publisher there. They just print it. But if you use their ISBN, they will be listed as the publisher. If you
Oh,
have
but if you have your own ISBN, you're the publisher. Okay.
All right, additional questions? Anything?
Jansina, I just want to ask you about your own the books that you publish for other people. So do you do everything yourself, or do you have like people who do cover design or interior design that work with you? I mean, do you have like a team of people, or do you do everything yourself?
I do have some contractors that will work with me if I get busy, but generally I do it myself.
Well, I admire that. That's a lot of work.
Thank you. It's a passion of mine, so I enjoy it.
Where are you located, Jansina?
I'm in Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Oh, okay.
I had one question. You said you had a typical length for a novel. Is there like a word count or size that you really think you should avoid? I tend to get long-winded in my stories, and I've been editing one for years trying to get it down smaller, but I don't know. 250 words is outside of my reach. I mean, go with 500. Can you do anything with a 500-page book now? I know that's on the edge of too long, but
it's really going to depend on your reader. If you're going for a young audience, then you want to go shorter, but a lot of readers actually prefer longer books. So there's not to an extent, I would say there's not a upper limit. I know KDP they won't publish books over 1,000 pages, so be aware of that. 500 is not too long.
Are there tricks to try to mess with the margins and try to make it not look so gigantic? I mean, you don't want it to be so big that someone's afraid of it, I guess. But.
Yeah, I actually recommend wider margins for the longer books because the spine shadow is bigger there, so you need to be able to read the inner part of the book. So I don't recommend changing the margins to do that too much.
I would also say that it depends on the genre of book you're writing too. Like if you're writing science fiction or fantasy, people expect longer books than other genres. I don't know what genre you're writing in.
I guess it'd be kind of a dystopian fantasy sort of thing, I guess.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you? Oh, dystopian fantasy.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, 500 pages.
I've had it called both. I guess, so.
Dystopian fantasy, 500 pages usually not an issue. Fantasy, at least in my experience, fantasy and science fiction, actually you can get away with longer books than most other genres. I mean, if anyone else wants to disagree with me, feel free, but look at Brandon Sanderson.
I'm halfway through on his right now.
Yeah,
that's
his
where I
newest
noticed
one.
The really small margins, and I thought, oh, maybe that's what he's doing. But
well,
it's
he's also got like
pages long, you know.
Yeah, he's also got like a 2,000 page book, so his newest one. So, but yeah, that I would say is something. Genre makes a big difference. Most mysteries aren't that long, but science fiction and fantasy tends to be longer.
How about those of you who are editors out there? If some of the 500-page book came to you and wanted some editing done, I mean, is that something that would be something that would scare you away, or?
It wouldn't scare me. I just I do work as an editor, and I do science fiction and fantasy, and that's why I said that just a lot of people sometimes get hung up in the details with building a world where they forget about the story. And, you know, just take I highly suggest going through content editing or a developmental editor first before doing copy editing. Well, do that anyway, but doing, because that tends to be the biggest issue I find. And Tyler also edits as well. He can probably disagree with me on this, that with fantasy and science fiction, people tend to get hung up on building the world and getting lots and lots and lots of cool detail, but we don't need all the cool detail. Sometimes the story gets lost in there.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I'm not scared of a, 500 page book either. The author just needs to understand that it's going to take me probably 2 to 3 times as long as it would for a shorter book. And also what's going to maybe be scariest is for the author, the price I'm going to have to charge for a longer book.
Yeah, because if you're looking at 250 words a page, well, I usually charge by the word. I think Tyler does as well, but it comes out about the same. You're looking at, the cost adds up quick with the number of pages.
Tyler, how long does it take to edit a book for a project that you would tackle?
Me? It would depend on the book. The average book, I usually ask for 3 weeks. And I usually go through it twice in those 3 weeks, and then I send it back. And then it depends on how long it takes the author to make revisions. And then they send it back to me and then I'll proofread it. And that, might take a day or two. It might take a week. Well, it partly depends on also on how busy I am. Sometimes, I'll be sitting here for a day twiddling my thumbs with nothing to do. And then the next day, 4 people send me a book on the same day. And I have to try to decide who's going to go first and who's going to have to wait. So, but I would say the average person for me, probably 4 to 6 weeks from when I get the book until the proofreading is done. But I also had authors who, I send it back to them and I don't hear from them for a year, and then they send it back to me. So
Good, thank you.
it's largely depends on the author.
Thank you.
And I'm about the same as Tyler.
Oh, that's good. Thank you. Good insights.
Jansina, does it differ for you since you're like the publisher too, or?
That's been only about 3 weeks for a book. Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks, everyone. This has been a nice wide-ranging discussion, and we hit on a lot of issues that are dear and near to everyone. Thank you, Jansina, for taking time out to develop all this material and present it to us. And we'll make it available to all our members after we're done on YouTube.
Yeah, for coming. It's been great.
Thank you, Jansina.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank
Thank
you.
you
Thank
much.
you.
A lot of good information.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.